It's time now for business, and for that I'm joined in the studio by Stephen Carroll. Hi, Stephen.
Hi, Haxie.
We're starting here in France, and the government has announced yet more help for businesses affected by COVID-19.
15 billion euros more will go to shore up existing government schemes which have been supporting businesses over the past year. In an interview with Les Echos newspaper, the finance and budget ministers say this latest emergency budget will be presented next week. They're describing it as a transition towards a return to normal. Now, this extra 15 billion comes on top of almost 100 billion euros in spending in 4 emergency budgets last year. The 15 billion breaks down into 4 billion to extend tax breaks to businesses, another 3.5 billion going towards the Solidarity Fund, which pays grants to those who've been forced to close or have suffered major losses in revenues due to COVID-19, and 6.5 billion will be used to top up the furlough scheme for workers. Now, the French government is starting to wind down many of these programmes as the economy reopens. Finance Minister Bruno Le Maire says that public debt will reach 118% of GDP this year. For now, the ministers say that the €100 billion economic recovery plan announced last year is sufficient to help France out of this crisis.
Meanwhile, Stephen, the French finance minister is also promising a breakthrough on the issue of taxing international companies.
That's after discussion with his German counterpart. Bruno Le Maire is hoping that a meeting of G7 finance ministers next week may see progress made on an agreement on a new global minimum tax rate for companies, and that a deal could be agreed within weeks. That's despite opposition from some quarters in Europe, as Ellen Gainsford now reports.
Years of debates and disagreements. A framework on a minimum global tax rate could be within reach. With the US on board, French and German finance ministers say a deal is close.
Le changement d'administration avec l'arrivée au pouvoir de M. Biden offre une opportunité historique de rejoindre les positions que nous avons défendues avec l'Allemagne, de rejoindre les positions de l'immense majorité des États européens pour une plus juste taxation internationale.
Le Maire and other supporters want to combat tax havens in an increasingly global and digital economy. The working proposal would include a 15% minimum tax rate for corporations, targeting international conglomerates and tech companies like Google, Apple, Facebook and Amazon. G7 finance ministers are set to meet in London in the beginning of June and could announce a breakthrough on the bones of the plan. Then, in early July, there's a broader gathering of G20 ministers, while the OECD continues to lead negotiations on a global level.
So I'm quite optimistic then when we get this agreement in the OECD, when we get it in G7, G20, it will be also something that will be part of the European legislation.
But not everyone is on board. Ireland, which currently has one of the lowest corporate tax rates in the world, has come out against the plan, although there's still a definite sense of forward momentum for a deal.
Now, 2 major oil companies have moved to cut off payments that would benefit Myanmar's military regime, Stephen.
That's right. France's Total and America's Chevron have suspended payments from a gas joint venture that would have eventually reached the junta. The move was approved by shareholders at both firms. The company said they were acting because of the humanitarian situation in Myanmar. The activist group Justice for Myanmar welcomed the move, but pointed out it would only affect some of the revenue that the junta is receiving from Total's operations in the country.
And Stephen, in the United States, the bosses of the country's biggest banks have been facing tough questions in Washington.
The CEOs face criticism from senators for not doing enough to help ordinary people during the pandemic. The bosses of JP Morgan, Bank of America, Citigroup, Wells Fargo and Goldman Sachs were speaking to the US Senate's Banking Committee. They defended the measures taken to support staff and customers during the past year, but faced criticism over issues including not waiving overdraft fees for customers.
While you automatically and at no cost got complete protection from overdraft fees at the Federal Reserve, could you please raise your hand if you gave the same automatic protection to your customers and automatically waived all of their overdraft fees? Okay, I'm not seeing anyone raise a hand, and that's because none of you gave the same help to your customers that the bank regulators extended to you.
Quick check out what's happening on the markets for you next. We're checking in on Amazon's shares on Wall Street on Wednesday after the company announced the purchase of the movie studio MGM for almost $8.5 billion. Not much reaction from investors. Shares finishing the day up just slightly. Turning to the Asian markets next, it's a mixed picture in trading today. We've got falls in Tokyo, Hong Kong, and on the Kospi in Seoul, and just some small gains in Shanghai.
And Stephen, finally from you, Iran has banned mining for cryptocurrency because of the impact on the country's electricity network.
That's right. President Rouhani put a 4-month ban in place on cryptocurrency mining a day after his energy minister had to apologise for a series of blackouts in major cities. Iranian officials have regularly blamed cryptocurrency miners for using vast amounts of electricity. The process requires running massive computers for long periods, so it's very heavy on energy use. Rouhani said what he called illegal miners were consuming between 6 and 7 times more power than those who have permits. It's estimated that 5 to 10% of the world's cryptocurrencies are mined in Iran, so a big impact too on their electricity network.
Stephen, Karen with a look through the day's top business stories. Thank you very much.